Hello, welcome to Snuggle Up. Make yourself comfortable. Lie down in a comfortable position. Now, close your eyes. Relax yourself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Today, we are going to listen to the story Cinderella. Once there was a gentleman who had a beautiful wife, a young daughter Ella, with unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. Unfortunately, his wife died saying her last words to Ella to be kind and courageous to everyone. Soon the man married again, for his second wife named Lady Tremaine, the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. She had a former husband, 2 daughters of her own, Drizella and Anastasia, who were indeed exactly like her in all things. No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding were over, the stepmother began to show herself in her true colors at the absence of her husband. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl, and the less because they made her own daughters appear the more odious. Ella's father died very soon during his business trips. The stepmother employed Ella in the meanest work of the house. She cleaned the dishes, set the tables, and cleaned Madam's chamber and those of Mrs. her daughters. She slept in the attic on a wretched straw bed, while her sisters slept in fine rooms with floors all inlaid, on beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had looking-glasses so large that they could see themselves at their full length from head to foot. The poor girl bore it all patiently. When she had done her work, she used to go to the chimney corner and sit down there in the cinders and ashes, which caused her to be called Cinder-wrenched. Drizella gave her that name, but the Anastasia, who was uncivilized, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella was 100 times more beautiful than her sisters, although they were always dressed very richly. One day, the king's son gave a ball and invited all young ladies for the ball. Our young misses were also invited. They were mightily delighted at this invitation, and wonderfully busy selecting the gowns, petticoats, and hair-dressing that would best become them. This was a new difficulty for Cinderella, for it was she who ironed her sisters' linen and pleated their ruffles. They talked all day long of nothing but how they could be dressed. Cinderella fixed their hair, She was very good girl and dressed them perfectly well. They were so excited that they hadn't eaten a thing for almost 2 days. They were continually in front of their looking glass. At last, the happy day came. They went to court, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could. When she lost sight of them, she started to cry. Suddenly, with a gush of wind, a fairy godmother appeared in front of Cinderella. Her godmother, who saw her all in tears, asked her what was the matter.
I wish I could. I wish I could.
She was not able to speak the rest, being interrupted by her tears and sobbing. The fairy godmother took her into her chamber and said to her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest she could get, and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could help her to go to the ball. Her godmother struck the pumpkin with her wand, and it was instantly turned into a fine coach, gilded all over with gold. Then she went to look into her mousetrap, where she found 6 mice. She gave each mouse as it went out a little tap with her wand, and the mouse was that moment turned into a fine horse, which altogether made a very fine set of 6 horses of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple grey. There was 3 more huge rats. The fairy chose the one, touched him with her wand, and turned him into a fat, jolly coachman. After that, she said to her, "Go again into your garden, and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me." Cinderella had no sooner done so, but her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach. The fairy then said to Cinderella, "Well, you see an equipped foot to go to the ball with. Are you not pleased with it?" "Oh, yes," she cried. "But I must go in these nasty rags?" she asked. Her godmother then touched her with her wand, and at the same instant her cloths turned into cloth of gold and silver, all beset with jewels. This done, she gave her a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole thing. Being decked out, she got up into her coach, but her godmother, above all things, commanded her not to stay past midnight, telling her at the same time that if she stayed 1 moment longer, everything would become just as they were before. She promised her godmother to leave the ball before midnight, and then drove away. When Cinderella visited the ball, all the eyes were on her. The king's son led her to the most honorable seat, and afterwards took her out to dance with him. She danced so very gratefully that they all more and more admired her. While dancing, she forgot herself, and suddenly she heard the clock striking 12. She jumped up and fled like a deer. The prince followed, but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince picked up most carefully. Cinderella reached home, but quite out of breath and in her nasty old clothes, having nothing left of all her finery but one of the little slippers, the mate to the one that she had dropped. A few days later, the king's son had it proclaimed by sound of trumpet that he would marry her whose foot this slipper would just fit. They began to try it on all the unmarried girls of the kingdom. It didn't fit anybody. It was the two sisters' turn, who did all they could possibly do to force their foot into the slipper, but they did not succeed. Cinderella, who saw all this and knew that it was her slipper, said to them laughing, "Let me see if it will not fit me." Her sisters burst out laughing. The gentleman who was sent to try the slipper looked earnestly at Cinderella, and finding her very handsome, said that it was only just that she should try as well, and that he had orders to let everyone try. He had Cinderella sit down, and putting the slipper to her foot, he found that it went on very easily, fitting her as if it had been made of wax. Her two sisters were greatly astonished, but then even more so when Cinderella pulled out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on her other foot. Now the sisters and the stepmother were astonished. Once they realized that she was going to marry the prince, they threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon for all the ill treatment they had made her undergo. Cinderella took them up, and as she embraced them, said that she forgave them with all her heart, and wanted them always to love her.